You're watching the Florida Caniac Perspective.
Welcome to the Florida Caniac Perspective 2019-2020 season. I am the Florida Caniac, and who isn't excited that hockey is finally back for our Carolina Hurricanes? We got a big show for you today as we go into our key updates going into the season, such as the preseason. I'm going to show you a little bit of what it was like to be in that Tampa, Florida area. I'm also going to go in and answer some of your questions from hashtag Ask the Florida Caniac. Know Your Caniacs is back for this first episode as we look at the Booster Club, and we're also going to dive in on some predictions down the road that I think might or might not happen. But first, let's take a look at those key additions and subtractions of the Carolina Hurricanes roster. So I can see here a lot of different names going back and forth with this Carolina Hurricanes roster. Our key subtractions I'm really focused on is Greg McKegg, Calvin DeHaan, and Curtis McElhinney. Those are some huge ones there. We'll touch base on Falk in a little bit, as we all know that just happened here. But a big one that really stood out was Scott Darling. Huge contract lifted off our shoulders, and we ended up getting from the Florida Panthers James Reimer in the process. Not too bad there, but I'm a little questionable regarding Reimer's play as of late. Big free agent signings, including the big one in Ryan Dzingel, Carolina's biggest prize there, followed by Carolina's other major big prize, Jake Gardiner. How in the world that worked out in our favor, I have no idea. I'm not a GM, so good thing there. And then, of course, the Joel Edmondson trade and Dominic Bach, the prospect from St. Louis, as we lose Justin Falk in the process. So here's my take on the whole Justin Falk situation. Carolina knows that they weren't able to come to an agreement with Justin Falk as the sides were just too far apart. So instead of really dealing with this situation down the road, it just seemed like it made a lot more sense, according to the Carolina front office, to really just deal him and get this over with before the season started. As a player, I really don't want to see a player like that on the team knowing that he's going to be going away at some time somewhere. I'd rather have players alongside me that really want to win a championship alongside my tail and the rest of my teammates all together. I don't think Justin Falk's head was in the right place when it came to this trade situation. For I get where he's going at. He wants more money, but he wants to be with his team as well. But when there's too much rocking going on between the head of Justin Falk and the front office of Carolina Hurricanes, it was just much easier down the road for all sides to just part ways and make a deal happen that's suitable for both sides for sure. That's why I'm perfectly okay with this, let's face it, a one-for-one deal. Yeah, there was draft picks involved, and yes, there was a prospect involved, and I get all that. But let's face it, Edmondson and Falk was really the main deal on this case. And it's really not going to make any hurtful acts towards the Carolina Hurricanes. You're getting a more defensive player that's also on the final year of his current contract. Same thing with Justin Falk. He's on the final current year of his contract, so why deal with that pressure? You're going with a guy that is actually going to fight for a much bigger deal versus the guy that's technically looking for a better deal and felt that he's already earned it in Justin Falk. Hope you guys understand my aspects of it, but let's get into the next thing. We're going to know your Caniacs, and we're going to learn more about the Booster Club. And this was a more requested Know Your Caniacs all the way through, as I've seen much interest on the Booster Club for the years down the road. So I talked to Christopher Clark, who's one of the ambassadors for the Carolina Hurricanes Booster Club, to get some more information for you guys. Check it out.
We do scholarships for youth hockey, give a couple of those a year. We've done donations for Triangle Special Hockey for their sled hockey program. We have our fan favorite where you vote for your favorite player at the end of the year. He gets a little plaque. The money goes to the Canes Foundation for Children's Charities. Okay. And plus we do some social stuff. We get together at various places. We have speakers. We get together to watch games. And generally just hang out at the table, meet people.
Okay, and I understand you do these meetings, or you try to do them around once a month?
Once a month, yes.
Okay, and tell me the type of venues you guys look for and what qualifies for a Booster Club event.
Well, generally we're looking for, something that's got some space for at least 15, 20 people, a little quiet, because, we do get a couple players a year. Plus, we get to see a lot of the behind the scenes people, which get some really interesting stories.
Great. And give me an example of what's one of the recent charities you guys have done lately, so that people know.
I said the last one was last year. I said we did a $250 donation for Triangle Special Hockey for the sled hockey people, so they could afford some ice time for practice and playing, because that's obviously growing in the community.
Okay, good stuff. And how would somebody sign up for the Booster Club?
Well, basically, you can come by if you're at the game. You can come by our table at 124. If you follow us on Twitter or Facebook, you can follow the link to do it online as well too.
Great. So everybody, just let you know, this is a wonderful organization that gives back to the community. They're here at Section 124 every game. Check them out at hurricanesboosters.org. They're also on Facebook as Carolina Hurricanes Booster Club. And Chris, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank Chris again for allowing me to speak to him on behalf of the Carolina Hurricanes Booster Club. And if you want to learn more information about it or how you can become a member yourself, definitely check out hurricanesboosters.org. It's a great group of people doing great things for the community, and you get some pretty cool benefits as a Booster Club member with meeting and greeting players and staff members as well of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now let's go on to my next subject, which is the Florida Caniac Tour. This is a small thing where I kind of travel all over parts of Florida and a little bit out of state as well, where I kind of check out some games I'm able to get to and share my experiences with you guys. The first stop happened to be the closest stop I'm going to have of all time, Tampa, Florida, of course. It is the first preseason game of the season, and I got to see a lot of great prospects of this organization and seeing where the future lies in Carolina, as most of the starters we're heading back to Raleigh anyway for their preseason debut as well. But from what I saw in Tampa, I was not disappointed one bit. Check this out.
Talked to Coach Burns, head strength and conditioning coach. Nothing out of normal with these guys, so that's all good there. Also talked to Roddy a little bit, everything's all good there. So these guys were mostly looking at just prospects and things like that. A few veterans out there, but nothing to really focus on anybody that we're used to seeing out there. Just a lot of younger guys to really focus on guys. Other than that, let's enjoy the game.
Well, as you can see, Tampa is a pretty cool venue to go see a hockey game overall. It is rated on my personal top 5 as great visiting places to see a hockey game, whether it's a team you don't want to deal with or not. And I like to thank those fans that were out there, fellow Caniacs that is, that just stopped me and greeted me, took pictures and things like that. It was a fun experience overall, as I always have a good time in Tampa as well. However, the next thing I'm going to talk about now is my 5 bold prediction questions. I threw some stuff out there on social media, and I'd like to thank those that voted for yay or nay or whatever the situation was. But let's get to the very first question overall. I talked about Sebastian Aho. Bold prediction question: will Sebastian Aho get 90 points this season? And a lot of you was a huge resounding yes in this case versus a little bit on the no factor. Now Aho, he actually got a pretty good amount of points. He was in the 82-84 point range, and that was a very respectable season. So seeing it being a possibility of 90 points going into this season, I actually have to agree with the fans on this one. I see him getting 90 points for a couple things. You're going to have better chemistry with Teuvo Teravainen and your linemen down the road. You're going to have a much stronger team also as well. And I definitely expect that power play to be much more improved versus the previous 2 seasons overall. So this one isn't really much of a stretch. I do agree Sebastian Aho will get the 90 points. Question number 2. Who is going to have the bigger impact from the new forwards we got this season? Erik Haula or Ryan Dzingel? And a lot of you definitely voted Ryan Dzingel. He's obviously got the bigger contract. He was a bigger free agency pickup. Of course, it's kind of a slam dunk in that case, right? Let's look at the deep tracks a little bit here. Erik Haula actually had an amazing season when he was healthy with the Vegas Golden Knights, and he was kind of one of the upper rising stars on that roster overall until the injury came into play. However, if this guy is healthy, I would expect him to be the biggest splash overall for this roster, because although we do expect a little bit of Dzingel, what he brings to the table, I really have a good feeling that Erik Haula just seems to be very excited to get back on the ice, and he's really going to prove it to himself overall. Plus, he really wants to get a bigger contract down the road, and that's really what these guys are going after. He's got a deal right now, but expect him to make a big splash going into season for sure for this Carolina Hurricanes roster. So for me, who's going to make the bigger impact? I'm going against the fans in this one. I'm going to pick Erik Haula. And now for question number 3. Will Peter Mrazek play more or less than 60 starts this season? And a lot of, well, 60-40 here on this one, where a lot of you are favoring Mrazek actually playing 60 games and starting those 60 games. And I'm kind of on the fence on this one, because Mrazek, although he is going into the season as the #1 goaltender, there is a huge contending spot for the #2 role between James Reimer and Alex Nedeljkovic. And I did predict that Nedeljkovic will be on the roster in some sort of fashion come this season overall, if you see my previous videos. But in this case, as Mrazek could start 60 games, I don't really see it happening, because I'm expecting this team to do a lot more. And by a lot more, I don't mean by keeping Mrazek on the ice for more than 60 games. I just don't see it happening, especially if the proven backups that are coming up could actually prove themselves worthy and have a good season. And that's really what this depends on here. Can the backups carry the load when Mrazek is actually trying to get some rest? And I really hope that's going to be the case in this situation here. So for that specific reason alone, I'm going to say Peter Mrazek is going to play less than 60 games, but it's going to be very close to the 60 games. I'm predicting between 50 and 55 games that he will start overall, so I'm going to go with less. Now for bold prediction number 4. Andrei Svechnikov, more or less than 30 goals this season? He had a great successful rookie campaign with a 20-goal season overall. Do we see him boosting those numbers up? I'm not going to trim around the bush here on this one. Let's just go with it and say he will hit that 30-goal mark. I don't know how much over that 30-goal mark he's going to get. Maybe close, maybe way over. It could be something like that, or even just barely miss it on that point. But based on the roster I'm seeing right now, the talent that's going to be around him, and the experience he gained in his first season, and the big body he does have, a lot of ands here, I see a no-brainer answer here that Svechnikov will get 30 goals this season. That's my bold prediction on that one. And now the 5th and final bold prediction question. The Carolina Hurricanes will actually hit the 100-point mark and their final record at the end of the season. Now, this is a tough question here, because it literally took 98 points to reach the playoffs. And Carolina hit 99 points to reach the playoffs and their wild card 1 spot. Why? Because the Metropolitan Division is just that tough. And overall, I think when it comes to the playoffs, the Metropolitan and the Atlantic Division, which means the entire Eastern Conference, is going to compete very, very hard for those playoff spots. Now, where do I see this actually happening when it comes to points making the playoffs? I can see it being another 95, 96 points to actually make the playoffs, even though it's a small dip versus the 98-point minimum that the playoffs actually had to be made for a team to get to. So in this case, we expect the Carolina Hurricanes to be a better team. The roster looks a lot better. This looks like a more complete roster. So I'm going to agree with the fans, which was a 90% success rate on this situation here. I'm going to say they're going to hit the 100 points. Maybe not way over the 100 points that I see here, because the division winner did only get 103 points in Washington. But I do see the possibility of this team reaching 100 points and maybe doing something even deeper than a wild card spot, which we'll touch to next here on my other things, which is the standings I think is going to happen here. But overall, this team will hit 100 points this season. So let's dive into these standings here. Where do I think this team is going to end up in the Metropolitan Division standings overall? Now, there is some reports there where Carolina could be the clear favorites to actually win the Metropolitan Division. Many other reports are also saying the Washington Capitals are again to be the favorites to win the division again, as many media outlets don't see Washington really missing a step here and there, even though they lost a few players out there and adding a guy like Radko Gudas, which I still think is ridiculous. However, there is one team that is being a little bit overlooked here, but not heavily overlooked, and that's the New York Islanders here. Swept them in the second round, and that's great, and we did beat Washington in 7 games. But that doesn't automatically give success when it comes to the division standings here, for Carolina was a wild card team that did beat the top 2 teams in that division. But I see that being a much more competitive division down the road, and that's why I think that barely 100-point mark might actually win the division again in this sort of situation. So in this case, based on the facts and everything I'm seeing here, and the Islanders still to me being a really good team in the regular season, I am going to say Carolina will finish second in the Metropolitan Division. And that's more of a realistic mark in my opinion here. I think they're going to be better than a wild card team overall, and just looking at the overall landscape of the entire division, there are going to be some teams that kind of fall in and out of place here. But as you can see in my standings here, I have Carolina finishing second in Metropolitan Division, but more based on either a 1-point differential or even a tiebreaker situation overall. Carolina and the Islanders head-to-head when it comes to face-to-face. Last season, it was more in the favor of the Islanders, but in the playoffs, is a whole different story overall. I will give the Islanders the Metropolitan Division, but I see Carolina making a little bit better playoff run than the Islanders once again. And now it's time to answer some of your questions from #AskTheFloridaCaniac. Thank you for those that submitted your questions to get onto this episode. If you'd like to be on future episodes with your question, definitely ask them below on the social media platforms, and bonus points for those that actually send me a video submission. You might even get a t-shirt down your road, or even a cool hat like what I'm wearing right now. However, the first question is in honor of the Justin Falk situation, and that is from our Caniac collector that we all know, Mr. John Orr. And John, again, thank you for your service, for what you have done in your career. He asks, as a huge Justin Falk fan, keep that in mind, explain the aspects of Falk's game that will now be missing on the Carolina Hurricanes blue line, and do I think the defense is better off? Great, excellent question here, John, and I'm going to answer this very simply. This was an offensive presence. Now, there was a lot of fan criticism down the road is, can this guy play defense, and why does he give up so many goals? Well, if you look at the stats overall, which I'm not going to post on here, there is no such thing as a perfect defenseman. Even Jacob Slavin, a huge fan favorite, has given up some timely goals while he was on the ice as well. So for the sake of argument, there is no such thing as a perfect defenseman. With that said, Justin Falk did bring a huge offensive presence on the blue line, especially on the power play. He was a very dangerous shot, whether you liked it or not, and overall, he did score a few goals for us and actually led defensemen overall in franchise history on goals scored. Yes, even better than Glenn Wesley when it came to this aspect. Glenn Wesley was more of a defensive presence, where Justin Falk was more of an offensive defenseman per se. Now, what did they get in exchange here for Edmondson? Edmondson is more of a defensive-minded player. Do you get more aggression out of Edmondson? You absolutely do. Do you get the offensive presence of Edmondson? Absolutely not, because he's more of a defensive player. And that's where Carolina is going to miss on this case. They are going to miss a little bit of offensive pressure. So hopefully players like Dougie Hamilton will step up a little bit, and maybe even Jake Gardner, and bring a little bit of life in that power play with a missing Justin Falk. Now, as far as the salary cap goes, yes, it does help out in that case. But is this defense better off? Well, time will actually tell on that one. Justin Falk was actually a pretty good leader on the blue line. However, will the other players that are back there step up? You could probably expect Jacob Slavin to do that, but will a veteran presence like a Jake Gardner or Dougie Hamilton step into that role? Well, we'll just find out as the season progresses. The next question comes from Stephen Riley from Facebook, and he asks, what do we expect from Peter Mrazek this year? An excellent question here, Stephen. And as I said earlier in my bold predictions, I'm expecting Mrazek to really carry a huge amount of load here for this Carolina Hurricanes roster. He is now going into the season knowing he is the #1 goaltender for this team, with Reimer on the back and the doorstep, along with Nedeljkovic on Reimer's doorstep. So there is a possible friendly goaltender competition here for that top spot, but highly unlikely. This season will kind of ride or die on the fate of Peter Mrazek's game overall. Now, can Peter Mrazek do that amazing magical year like he did alongside Curtis McElhinney? Time will tell on that one. He's got a pretty good defense in front of him and some pretty good offense to really back up if he happens to have a bad game. So I do expect Mrazek to have a huge weight on his shoulders, but not as much weight as you possibly can imagine with the additions and subtractions that this roster has had overall. So what do I expect out of Peter Mrazek overall? Just to play his game simply and to really trust his teammates overall, and the rest should hopefully come through. The final question of the day comes from, and I hope I say this right, Hansa Zajonk. I'm not sure what nationality it is. It looks almost French, it looks almost Czech, but I kind of went down the middle of this one, so I apologize if I said your name wrong. But he asked a pretty cool question here. If you could trade back any former Hurricanes player, who would it be and why him? Now, I can see a few arguments here saying it could be an Eric Stahl or even a Curtis McElhinney from recently, and you could probably make a few arguments for some other players here and there. But if there's one player I would go after personally to bring back, assuming he didn't retire, maybe was a little bit more in his prime, I'm going to go with Matt Cullen. Now, why would I say that? And I'm going to base it on today's roster, so keep that in mind. With the absence of Justin Williams, where it's kind of up in the air, even though he's taken somewhat of a break, he really hasn't fully made the decision if he's really wanting to come back to hockey or just simply retire and set off on a sunset. Although Matt Cullen retired, it was a pretty easy decision for him overall. But what if Matt Cullen did not retire and really wanted to play a few more seasons down the road like he really was capable of doing? Yes, he's a little bit older player, and that's all fine, but the leadership qualities that this guy brings and the experience, and he does have Carolina Hurricanes experience, hence the question here. He has won a Stanley Cup with not only the Carolina Hurricanes, but alongside with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is starting to sound really familiar, much like Justin Williams in a way. So looking at those two differences there really isn't a whole lot of differences. It's pretty much saying, hey, we lost Justin Williams, we got Matt Cullen. It's not going to change a whole lot because they're literally the same type of personality. And that's, my friends, is why I think Matt Cullen would have been a great addition to bring back had he not retired. Well, we really do have a lot to look forward to for this upcoming season of Carolina Hurricanes hockey. From new white uniforms to a new batch of players on the ice, we have a lot to look forward to as we have a lot of expectations to fill after the successful last season that we just recently had. Let's hope this team gels together faster rather than later as we look forward to an amazing upcoming season of Carolina Hurricanes hockey. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Florida Caniac Perspective. Thank you for watching this episode, and if you did like it, please hit that subscribe button and hit that bell for future updates of upcoming episodes and even other videos from the Florida Caniac Network. Let's cheer on our boys for the upcoming season, and let's get ready for the face-off of 2019 and 2020. Thanks everyone for watching, and as always, go Canes!